My name is Melba Pearson, and I have the honor of serving as the Deputy Director for the ACLU of Florida. I'm also the co-chair for the Prosecution Function Committee, and I sit on the board for the Center for Innovation for the ABA. So today we're going to talk about innovation, but in the context from diversion all the way to reentry. So there's different ways that we can use innovation to keep people out of the criminal justice system, to aid them when they're transitioning out of the criminal justice system, and to help them re-engage in society. I was thinking about this issue, and I've been doing a lot of work around this issue in the last couple of years. And if you think about some people who have long sentences, they may not have even known, like they don't know how to use an iPhone. They went in before certain technology became popular. So when you think about someone who went in before the internet was a big thing, before like Google was a thing, and they're now getting out, do they have the skills to be able to compete with somebody who has been out and getting this knowledge the whole time? And that's just one aspect to think about. And of course, as we heard in the last panel, the whole goal is to keep people out of the system, because once someone gets into the system, unfortunately, you get caught up and it grinds and grinds until, in some cases, it completely destroys you. So let's look at some innovative things that are going on across the country. And with that, I'm going to introduce you to our panelist. Directly next to me is Sheriff Daron Hall, and he is the sheriff of Davidson County, which the seat is Nashville, here where we are at the moment. He was sworn in as the 61st sheriff for Davidson County back in 2002, and he was elected to his 5th term in 2018. When he ends this term, he will be the longest serving sheriff in metropolitan Nashville history. So I think that's pretty cool. He's also probably the first sheriff to ever want to eliminate his own job by ensuring inmates become productive citizens and stay out of jail. He provides treatment, programs, and community engagement for those who are incarcerated. For the past 10 years, these efforts have resulted in a dramatic 32% decrease in the inmate population, leading to the closure of a 300-bed facility in 2011. He is passionate about decriminalizing mental illness and is working towards criminal justice improvements for mentally ill arrestees. He was awarded the National Alliance on Mental Illness award for his commitment for this ongoing effort. And during more than his 30-year career, he's served this county under 3 sheriffs, and he also holds a number of leadership positions in national law enforcement organizations. Please join me in welcoming Sheriff Daron Hall. I'm going to go all the way through.
Oh, okay.
All right. And then next to him is Sam Harden. Sam Harden is with the Florida Justice Technology Center, and he is the development team leader and he also serves as the project manager for the Florida Criminal Data Pilot Project for Measures for Justice. He is a Florida attorney and a computer developer who believes that technology is essential to closing the access to justice gap. Please join me in welcoming Sam Harden. Our last panelist is en route. Sadly, she is stuck behind a crash. She's okay, but she's en route. Her name is Maryam Abolfazli, and she is the External Affairs Director for Project Return. Project Return is a Nashville nonprofit that helps formerly incarcerated people reintegrate into society by connecting them to job opportunities, housing, and other services. Prior to joining Project Return in 2019, she was the campaign manager for American Muslims for Us All, which is a campaign to end discrimination against Muslims based in Nashville. In 2017, she wrote the content of Culturama, a mobile game aimed at bridging American and Iranian youth. Previously, she was the Chief Operations Officer of Brave New Software, which produced Lantern, a popular censorship circumvention application. Before Lantern, she was the Middle East and North Africa Director of the Eurasian Foundation, where she developed one of the first online trading models to cultivate and support women entrepreneurs in the Middle East. And she obtained her MPA at Columbia University. So we will welcome her when she arrives. So let's start with you, Sheriff. Tell us a little bit about the innovative programs you're working on here in Nashville, and what encouraged you to take a path often less traveled by people in your position?
Yeah, so let's see. Are we on? There we go. By the way, thank you for being here on Friday afternoon. What a pretty amazing thing on Friday afternoon, people to sit and listen to criminal justice matters in the city when you can stare down Broadway. So thanks for being here. I also see the lawyer who represents me in all of my cases. I appreciate Allison being here. She's keeping me out of trouble, so I'm glad that she's unfortunately having to hear me this afternoon. Real quick, I read the book Helter Skelter when I was 16, and I've always wanted to know why people do what they do and can we do anything about it. In Nashville, our charter is a little different. The sheriff's office doesn't arrest people. As I tell people, the police in our city arrest people, and the sheriff's office is trying to arrest the problem. We believe that when a person is arrested is the beginning of the solution to try to solve what's going on in our community. I have a lot of friends that are police officers, so I can say this. Being a police officer is not hard. It's dangerous. Figuring out who did something is not hard. It can be dangerous, but doing something about why they did it is hard. It is hard and complicated. And we, in the sheriff's office, because everyone arrested comes to our door, we book nearly 40,000 people a year, some 100 a day, that are coming off the streets for a variety of reasons. And so I read the book Helter Skelter. I wanted to know why, and I'm now in this for 30-something years, and I can tell you why, for the most part. 9 out of 10 people in our jail system today, when they're brought to us, are addicted. We know that. We can diagnose that. There are many experts, but they're clearly addicted upon arrival. And somewhere between 30 and 40% of those, and that number varies for various reasons, are diagnosed mentally ill. That's not their mother. That's not their lawyer. That's not their drug dealing friend. That's not anyone's excuse. That is a diagnosis by a mental health hospital. In our situation, it's a mental health professional through the co-op here in Nashville. Why that really matters, and again, Nashville is a unique place, but for me, I grew up here, but I grew up about a mile away from a mental health hospital. I was born in 1964, and in 1964, that hospital took people who were diagnosed mentally ill into its care, and that's where they would stay, obviously under the care of mental health professionals. But Nashville did what our country did. It tore down its hospitals over those years, since the 60s and 70s. We were going to deinstitutionalize them, but we never did that. We reinstitutionalized them in jail. Jails and prisons grew as hospitals went away. I run the largest mental health institution there is in our city. The largest one in our country is in Los Angeles County. It's the jail there. Unfortunately, when you tore down institutions, you just moved them to a new one. And we now, if you don't know, I've done a lot of research on this, but if you don't know, the idea was to get rid of the stigma of mental illness. We now got rid of the stigma of mental illness by adding the word criminal to it. We are now criminally mentally ill, is what happens. And so I've been in the jail system and wanting to know why people do what they do and what can we do about it my entire life. And so over the last 20, 25 years, Nashville's done a few things along the way. We started a mental health court over 20 years ago, one of the first places in the country. Quite frankly, the people who do that work are good. Their hearts are right and all those things, but I'm against that. I don't believe we should be sending people to court to help decide what is right and wrong for them from a mental health perspective. And so what I wanted to do about 4 or 5 years ago was understand why are so many mentally ill people ending up in jails in Nashville. We had a crisis as it relates to bed space and need. So we did a deep dive into who they were and why. And one of the things that we found out was, if you look at the top 5 reasons a person comes to jail who's mentally ill, number 1 and number 3 and number 4, the vast majority of people who are mentally ill come to jail because they failed to do something we asked them to do anyway. Come to court, go to probation, or things they're never going to be successful in doing. We never should have placed them on probation, in my opinion, and we never should have given them a court date, understanding they're not going to make court if they're not stabilized on their medication. And so the reality of it for me was, these people continue to go through in and out our doors in jails in Nashville and all over the country, quite frankly, because we've used the jails as a mental health institution and it's not being successful. There were 2 prominent cases here in Nashville that kind of highlight the problem, and I know there's many other questions about it, but I wanted to kind of give you this to start with. This is 4.5 years ago. We were looking into the data at the time so we could come up with a solution. If you understand why it's happening, what can we do about it? And in this period of time in which we were studying it, within a few months of each other, these 2 events occurred One of those was a middle of the afternoon. Imagine Nashville. That's probably why traffic is always a wonderful problem in Nashville. But it's the middle of the afternoon, and right out here on the interstate, a man got out of his car in the middle of the afternoon, climbed up on the big green signs that we all go under every day on the interstate, and began to dangle, if you will, or hang on the edge of the sign, and refused to come down. And so Nashville did what every community in this country does. We called the police. Traffic was blocked. Obviously, the situation was dangerous. Traffic's blocked. 2 hours later, it was a national news story. Everyone's blowing horns and throwing things and cussing and raising Cain. We did what our country does. We called the police. The police arrived. They negotiate him down off of the sign. We put him in the back of the police car. We turn the blue lights on and we drive away. He arrives in booking. What do? We fingerprinted, photographed. We put him in a cell. We dressed him out. We handcuffed him, took him to court tomorrow morning, and just so you know, yet we convicted him. Right? Our community did a great deed. Not really, at all. The truth was the man was suffering from severe anxiety disorder. He believed the cars on the interstate were closing in on him, so he got out and tried to get away. We took him off the sign, and we put him in a cell half as big as this with 44 other people, and believed that we did something good by convicting him of something called obstructing a right-of-way. Within a few months of that event, in our hometown here in Nashville, right out on the other side of town, our airport, middle of the afternoon, a middle-aged man walked into the airport completely naked. Got in line at the airport to buy a ticket, and yes, there are pictures that went out everywhere of this naked man in the line. There were people in front of him and behind him, and there he stood, and there were people taking pictures. What did we do as a society? What did we do as the it city called Nashville? We called the police. What did the police do? They did their job. They arrived. They handcuffed him. They put him in the car. They drove him downtown. They put the blue lights on. We get him to the jail. We unlock the door. We put him in. We handcuff him, fingerprint, photograph, right? House him, get up tomorrow, restrain him, get him to court, get him in front of the judge, and we convicted him. 20 days, indecency and other things. But here's what I want, and I say this everywhere I go. These aren't made up. I don't have to make up stories. I could spend the rest of the day if you wanted to talking about them. But these are two interesting ones. Neither one of these people, by the way, had any intoxicants in their system. Okay, this man at the airport clearly didn't even understand he needs to wear clothes. Why in the world do we think, I know I'm in the wrong room to say this, that lawyers and judges and sheriffs are going to do any good for him in a criminal justice system and try to tell him what the law is? He didn't wear clothes that day. And now he has a conviction. Do we feel any better? Not me. He will be on probation. Do you think he'll make it? Not me. And unfortunately, the criminal justice system is tied up with problems like that. I will get to the details because I know we have to go further, but we, as it related to those two cases, designed a facility. We were building a jail at the time. Or I was telling people we were going to build a jail. We weren't. We were going to take the money that we were going to use to build the jail and build what we need. We were going to build a diversion center for people like the man on the sign and the person who was in the airport. Because in the end, I don't believe the person would have been involved with the criminal justice system at all if they had been diagnosed and stabilized on their medication. And obviously provided some mental health care instead of the criminal justice system. And so as we speak, just about a mile away from here, there's a 60-bed behavioral care center being built adjacent to what you would call a booking room. In the future, and we'll get into the details, in the future the person arrives here if they are misdemeanor offenders, which are 80% of these people, and they're diagnosed mentally ill, we plan to divert them pre-booking away from the justice system so they will not owe the probation and courts and so forth that leads them to jail down the road. So hopefully we can talk some more about it here in a few minutes.
Great. Thank you so much, Sheriff. All right, turning to you, Sam. Now, you've got two super interesting programs that you're working on, one of which is a result of legislation that was passed last year in Florida. So can you tell us a little bit about both of the projects you're working on?
So as Melba mentioned, I kind of wear two hats. I'm the development team leader for Florida Justice Technology Center, and we are working on a what we're terming a diversion app. It's a computer program that's internet-based for people who are in diversion programs, and our main goal there is to increase the success potential and success rate for people in those diversion programs. We're currently looking at it and scoping it out for 3 counties in Florida. 2 of the larger ones, Hillsborough, which is Tampa, Duval County, which is Jacksonville, and also Leon County, which is Tallahassee. And in Florida, is 67 different counties in Florida. And diversionary programs are kind of on a county by county basis. They're discretionary based on the prosecutor who's in that county, whether or not they want to offer diversion programs. And the prosecutor ultimately has the discretion to let people in or kick people out of diversion. We have counties with no diversion programs, and we have counties with extensive diversion programs. And so we're building this program to assist those programs and the people in those programs by keeping track of the requirements for completing the program. For example, in Hillsborough County, someone who's put into misdemeanor diversion has to deal with a lot of different agencies that they interact with, because Hillsborough County farms out a lot of the tasks that go along with diversion. They have to complete community service. They have to do check-ins with some sort of officer, sometimes a probation officer, sometimes a social worker, depending on the program. They have to pay fines. Depending on the kind of program, they may have to do counseling at a private agency that contracts with the county. They may have to do drug tests at a private agency that contracts with the county. And one of the big problems that they have is none of those little subcontractors talk to each other, and they have a very hard time communicating the information that the state needs to see if the person's compliant with diversion or not. And so it ultimately falls on the head of the person in diversion to keep track of all that stuff, as well as their court dates and check-in dates and everything like that. And so our goal is to increase their success rate by giving them a platform and a way to keep track of all that and compile all the things that they have done and bring it to court with them. So like I mentioned, that's currently in the scoping out prior to development phase for those 3 counties. The second hat that I wear is I'm the project manager for the Florida Criminal Justice Data Pilot Project. There's a lot of acronyms that go along with everything that I do, so I try not to use them. But last year, the Florida legislature decided that they wanted to have a statewide criminal justice data portal run by Florida Department of Law Enforcement. And every county in Florida is now supposed to start submitting criminal justice data to Florida Department of Law Enforcement. And Florida Department of Law Enforcement is going to compile that data and make it publicly available via either a download or an API. Right
I'm
now,
sorry, what's an API?
Application Program Interface, is basically how machines talk to each other. So if you look at a site like Weather Underground or something like that, or a computer app that uses weather data, it's using something like Weather Underground's API to pull that data down, like the current temperature in Nashville. So FDLE has been tasked with creating that portal to go and get the data, but all the agencies in each county have been tasked with sending the data to FDLE. The problem is that each county has been keeping their data on site in the format that works best for them for the past 15 years or so. And they've been using private contractors to create the case management systems to help them manage that data. That means that the data is different from county to county, and even if the data may look the same, the data may have different meanings county to county. So a lot of what we're having to do is dive into it and figure out what exactly is there and what exactly things mean. So that's kind of a huge project that I'm working on. In the diversion context, one of the things that we're looking at is how do we accurately measure the data and compile the data for people that are in diversion programs? Because, as most of you probably know, people get put in diversion programs and then things can get compiled outside the traditional data system that the court uses. Or people can be offered some sort of deal where they're not prosecuted at all, that all that's created is an arrest record. And even though they interact with the court system, records won't be created, often for the person's benefit, because once a person has a court record, that can follow them no matter what happens in that court record. That can follow them for the rest of their lives because it's out there somewhere. So a lot of prosecutors will forego the creation of a court record in favor of the person doing something, and that makes it extremely hard to measure. So that's one of the things that we're looking at. How do you accurately start measuring those sorts of outcomes without negatively impacting the people that you're trying to measure? Because if you start requiring courts to keep records and prosecutors to create public records, then that benefit goes away. So those are the two things I'm kind of working on.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. And Maryam, welcome. So thrilled that you could be here with us today. So could you tell us a little bit about Project Return Nashville and sort of the services it provides for the returning citizens of the area?
So Project Return is an organization that was started in 1979 by two reverends that felt that formerly incarcerated people were not being met where they were at when they were released from prison. And what that means to me, and I believe to the organization, is that the cards are really stacked against you when you get out of prison or jail. Most importantly, we focus on employment. Because the understanding there is income is dire. You need that ASAP to start getting back on your feet. And hopefully many are trying to start a new trajectory with their life. And so income is key. So we focus primarily on employment. But we do other things too, because obviously a human needs other things. So when you walk in our doors, we do wraparound support. That could be anything from some food, some clothes, medical, dental, vision. That could be, there's a state ID issue, I'm sure many of you all know, but you often don't have one when you leave. So we really help with that. Similar to sort of the issues that my co-panelists were speaking about, there's a lot of things that the government expects you to do when you're released. So we support the human version, as opposed to the technology version, of getting a lot of that done, whether it's one big one is child support. In Tennessee, I know that some of you all from out of town, in Tennessee, that accrues while you're in incarceration, so it's considered voluntary unemployment. So you can leave with a really overwhelming and terrifying bill once you get out that you may have not even known is accruing. So we support in finding manageable ways to address that, because it's really key in terms of setting up this new life. It's hard to be running away from that debt. Another thing we help with is court costs and talking about solutions for that, and then financial coaching in general. We have a few social enterprises that we created. One was, we realized that upon release and walking through our door, which sometimes is within 24 hours, a lot of people get on the bus once they've been released, and the next morning at 8 a.m. they're at our door, having been told inside or by a friend, like, go there, that's where you can start. And basically it was a 3-month time period before you could get a job. So we created a transitional employment agency to address that, and kind of help people get on their feet so that they can get long-term employment after that, and coach them along the way. It's a big thing to sort of get back into the job market. We also have Pro-H, which is a housing opportunity for those that have sort of been out, had a good track record, and need affordable, positive housing. So we've redesigned them, rehabbed them, and they're there for, there's not tons, we're hoping to get a lot more. We have 16 right now. And then we also have a sort of cleaning service and landscaping and sort of property management service that people can quickly join in on and get income from. We do construction readiness, hospitality readiness, and we also pay each day that people are participating in the training, because we know that that's an opportunity cost. They're missing out on earning very valuable income for them while they're trying to up their skills and get competitive in the job market.
So wait, Maryam, let me just dig down a little deeper on
Sure.
that. So in other words, is this a service that, like, hey, I'm throwing a party at my house, I could call Project Return and you guys would bring over a crew, or talk us through
That's
a little bit?
That's
how
a
that
great
works.
business idea. I think that's next.
And I won't even ask for a cut.
No, that's next. So no, right now the crew, the last one, props, just launched this year, so we're figuring it out. But right now it's primarily commercial and residential landscaping, cleaning. But we do this hospitality class with a kind of a world-renowned chef that's also been the chef at Heritage Hotel, and she really does get them prepared for being in all the competitive restaurant industry here in Nashville, which is sort of booming right now. But a vision we have is that one day we have the kitchen, we don't have the facilities for that right now, so we couldn't come and do a catering event at your house, for instance. But you're a visionary in that way. So yes, ideally that would be something that down the line we could do. But yeah, the idea, bottom line, get people employed, get them getting paychecks as soon as possible, get them getting normalized into the way things work since they've been out. I think that covers more or less what we try to deal with. Our main understanding is that it's relationship based. We don't have like a case management system, so anybody in our program service area can deal with anybody that walks through the door. So if Maryam came in on Monday and started job readiness classes, we have job readiness classes every Monday. If she started that on Monday, but she comes in, let's say 2 weeks later, and she needs to talk about something, or she needs a suit because we give interviewing suits and stuff like that, she could meet with Joe or Michael or whoever in the team. She doesn't need to go just to Maryam. So it's transferable. We're all sort of ready to go. We believe in the urgency of now, so we'll kind of deal with whatever's getting in the way right now. And we deal with a lot of the agencies and courts and local county clerks and stuff like that to help with that. We are not mandated by the government. We don't have an official relationship with the government or with any institution. We do go into every prison and jail in Tennessee almost every day, so that people that are about to be released know that we're around and that we're available for them when they come out. But we are not mandated, or there's no real relationship other than sort of a collegial one.
Thank you.
Yep.
So coming back for a second, Sheriff, you talked about sort of the impetus for you to get involved in this work, being that you read Helter Skelter and you really were trying to figure out why people do what they do. So that behavioral aspect. How do you think that's going to translate into this facility, this residential facility that's going to open? First of all, when is it going to open? And what's sort of the model that you have in mind for it to be successful and effective?
Yeah, so I think it goes back for me. It goes back into why. I was the president of the American Correctional Association a few years ago, and I traveled around the world actually in that capacity. And I would go in a room like this. I was in Germany one time, and I was like I am now, and we were all introducing ourselves. And I remember saying, "My name is Daron Hall. I'm from the United States, representing the American Correctional Association," and people snickered, and laughed. And the truth was, I learned over that 2-year period that yes, we over-incarcerate by far more than I lived in Australia, working in a prison over there. Most countries laugh at how many people we incarcerate in our country. But what I've told people is, let's figure out why. And one of them is that no other country, modern country, would put you in jail for being naked in the airport. They wouldn't. You can't be naked in the airport. I don't want it either. But jail does nothing to tell a man to wear clothes. If he didn't know to do that, no lawyer, no judge is going to change that. And so what's difficult for me is to know that in our country, roughly 30 to 40% of the people, let's just say 30 to be comfortable, the vast majority of those people are mentally ill, diagnosed, and would be in hospitals or care centers in any other country. If you take that percentage out of our jail population, we can have a real conversation about what to do next. And we are not outside the norm of these other countries. And so for me, it's why. Why are people coming to jail? And when you look at the why, there's a large chunk of people in this city tonight that will be arrested for criminal trespass. There's a man who's been arrested 100 times in the last 12 months. Add that up. It's hard to do. And you got to work hard to be arrested every 3 days.
Wow.
right? And here's what's really sad. We're wasting your money.
Mm-hmm.
We're wasting your resources. We're doing nothing productive for him. In this case, it's a man. But society thinks that we've solved the problem. So if we know why a person's going to jail in the volume that we're talking about, then let's try to do something about the why. And the why in this particular piece is because they are, quite frankly, lost. There is no mental health system here. One other story that's the why I'm so interested in this. I was at home a couple of years ago, 3 years ago now. It's Saturday night, 10:30 at night. My phone rings at all hours of the night. It's a weird job. That doesn't surprise me. But this was a friend of mine, a criminal defense attorney. And the call went like this: "Hey, Daron, what's going on? Not a whole lot. I need some help. What do you need?" "Yeah, you remember so-and-so and so-and-so?" "No." "Well, their kids played on our son's baseball team when they were 10. My son's 24. I said, "No, I don't remember them." And he said, "Well, you should. He was the left fielder who picked grass like our kids. I don't know." And he goes, "He's in trouble and needs help. He's bipolar. And the parents want to get him help. Can you help me get him committed to the mental health institution here for our state?" And I said, "No. I have 10 people in my jail facilities who are butchering themselves, diving off the bunk to try to harm themselves, acting out psychotic in a very dangerous way. I can't get them in the hospital they need to be in. There's no way I can get a young man who's bipolar, who his parents are nervous about, in front of them." So the answer is it's not going to happen. So he waits a minute, and he goes, "I'm at their house right now." This is a very smart guy. He says, "Daron, if we can get him arrested, though, he would be seen by mental health when he gets down there."
Mm. Yeah.
And I said, "I can't tell you that." And we hang up. 2 hours later, it's midnight. Phone rings. What do you think he said? "Daron, he's in booking. Can you get the mental health to make sure they're seeing it?" So this is a true story, every bit of this. But I want you to know something. I have become very familiar with this family. I've asked her to participate with me, the mom, in a community advisory group ever since this event happened. This is a true story. The family could buy the hospital. Not exaggerating. They could buy the hospital. This mother, if she walked in here right now, would tell you that her son has been stabilized some. He's doing better. But you know what she would say next? He can't get a job. We criminalized him to get him help. And that's what's wrong. And by the way, that's the people I know. There's 30 of them tonight. I don't know them. And we should do better. It's just bad.
So pivoting back to you, Sam, tell us a little bit about the journey of you getting involved with both of these projects, and how did you come up or help come up with the idea, and sort of like what was your vision? What do you ultimately want to see happen with this? What's like success?
So a little bit about me. I was not originally a computer developer. I was an English major in college. I went right to law school because
Mike,
I
oh,
can't hear you.
is it not on? Maybe it's
Yeah, there you go.
okay. There we go. I was an English major in college, and if anybody has seen Avenue Q, what do you do with a BA in English? I went to law school, of course, because I wanted to make some money. And I ended up, me and a friend had our own criminal defense firm in Tampa. And I started to see people, would come to me, ask for advice. And most people, in my experience is limited, interact with the civil or criminal justice system maybe once or twice in their entire lives. And they have no idea what is really going on and what to expect, what the consequences could really be 10 years from now. And I started to see that a lot of the cases repeat themselves. John Q. Public, who comes in with a DUI, has pretty much the same case as John F. Public that comes in with a DUI a year from now and is, going to be maybe in front of the same judge. And, there's a lot of similarities, but neither of those people know that. And because I had interacted with this system hundreds of times and I'd been in court every day, I had this insider knowledge that they didn't have. And I started to think that can't be the reason why my work has value in and of itself. You know, they're paying me for my expertise, not, you know, to be a psychic, and not because I, you know, have this occult knowledge. They're paying me to counsel them. They're paying me to help them. And I started to think about too, you know, how can we start to, you know, instead of one lawyer helping one person one at a time, you know, down the road, how can we start aggregating everything? How can we start to help, you know, empower agencies, empower lawyers to help more than one person at a time, to help more than one client at a time, and to impact people more than one person at a time. And I started to get into technology and the way it can be applied, and ended up teaching myself how to program. I'm self-taught. Um, eh, so that's kind of like the backstory of how I got into this weird field that I'm in right now. As far as the Diversion app goes, there's a lot of different metrics for success that we think about. One of the things that we think about with, you know, like I said, people interact with the civil or criminal justice system maybe once or twice in their entire lives, but everybody has civil justice issues that they don't recognize as civil justice issues. And the justice system and the people that work in the justice system have a hard time thinking about clients and people the way doctors do or hospitals do as far as a continuum of care. We do one-off treatment, right? You have a criminal justice client, you treat that patient, you have that client, you let them go. Hopefully they never call you again unless they have some money, right? I mean, I was in private practice. That was sometimes the mentality, and it's bad. We never think about it in terms of continuum of care. That person may get done with a diversion program, may leave court with a misdemeanor conviction, and go back, and 6 months later, they get an eviction notice. 6 months later, you know, they have Medicaid, they get denied a benefit for some reason totally unrelated to their criminal case, but they have no idea that's a justice issue, and no one is there to hold their hand, and they have no resource to go to that they know about, to ask about that. And so one of the things that we're trying to incorporate into this diversion program is to build in some sort of follow-up, to build in that continuum of care. One of the projects that that the FJTC, the Florida Justice Technology Center, is working on right now in Florida is called statewide triage. And the concept is, why not have a place where somebody can go and be connected to a civil justice organization without even knowing that what they have is a civil justice issue? I have a problem with housing. I have a problem with Medicaid. I have a problem with my job. I have a problem with my domestic partner. They don't know that's a civil justice issue. They just know they have a problem. How can we make that warm handoff to, say, the Duval County Legal Aid Organization, to the family shelter, to something like that? How can we make that warm handoff? And we don't have to sit there and read the person, 10 pages of disclaimer and, you may have a legal issue, something like that. We just need to make the warm handoff and make sure that person stays in the continuum of care. So that's one of the things that we look at in terms of success. Another thing that we want to start measuring, and this is where the power of data kind of comes in, is we can measure, once this thing gets implemented, we want to be able to measure the success rates for the people in diversion, as well as look backwards on the agencies providing services to those people. Do people who interact with this agency have a lower success rate than people that get the same service from a different agency? A good example of this, and this is something that happened in Hillsborough County within the last 5 years. Hillsborough County used to put everybody in probation. They'd have to go out to the Salvation Army, who ran the probation program for misdemeanor. And the courthouse in Tampa is downtown, but Salvation Army was located about 10 miles away. And Tampa has very, very bad public transit. And the sign-up rate for probation was abysmal when that was true. They moved probation to the sheriff's office and put it inside the courthouse, and all of a sudden the sign-up rate went exponentially higher than it had been, just by moving that location, because people frankly weren't able to get out to Salvation Army, and they were violating their probation by not signing up because they couldn't get there. not because they had bad intent, not because they didn't care, but because they couldn't get there. So those are the kind of things that we want to start being able to measure, because as the sheriff said, we don't want to waste, the taxpayers' money. We want to have solutions that are effective, and the way to tell those solutions are effective or not is through the data.
So thanks. So Miram, you have a very fascinating bio where you've done interesting things around empowerment of women and, working on destigmatizing and eliminating stereotypes involving people who are, Muslim Americans or of the Muslim faith. But what kind of brought you to this reentry space, and how has that background helped you be able to, excuse me, deal with some of the challenges that come with this work?
Sure. Yeah. So about my journey, I grew up in Nashville and focused primarily on the divide between what was going on in my home as an Iranian and a child of Iranian immigrants, and what was going on outside. So I just sort of became a natural ambassador or mediator or whatever, translator, and I knew very early that I wanted to work in the sort of social impact space, primarily internationally, because that's what my expertise sort of seemed like. And so I did spend 20 years traveling the world, and primarily Middle East. But again, ironically or not, the issue that I found was really important when I was designing. I do a lot of project design and fundraising for the programs I come up with, was that whereas people thought the issue was rights-based in the Middle East, particularly for women, I decided, I had lived in Afghanistan in 2003, 2004, so I had thought about this, but I decided that the issue was actually financial and economic, so that if you gave me my rights, I still will be stuck to whoever my abuser or bully or whoever that's in my life, because I cannot financially stand on my own 2 feet because of the way that the sort of economy was set up. So we decided to focus on the entrepreneurship and job skills training aspect of it, thinking that if you empower someone in job skills and leadership and entrepreneurship, they can sort of create chart their course for themselves. And it worked. A lot of women came because the countries were very well connected online, and the women came on their own time, figured out how to explain it to whoever they needed to, and started to chart their course. And beyond that, whereas, maybe some of them didn't create their businesses, but they gained a lot of leadership and self-confidence skills that helped manage whatever issues were arising. So to me, it seems very natural that I'm working on employment for those that have left or been released from jail or incarceration, because it's very similar. It's, getting that income and getting those jobs. I find that a lot of dignity comes from your work. A lot of dignity comes from your craft or whatever that you are doing during the day, being respected by your employer, being respected by your teammates, doing work that you're proud of. I think that is a source of a lot of pride, even more so than necessarily money, but just that day to day. And that's what we hear, the routine, the place to show up daily, the place that's expecting you and happy to see you're there. We get a lot of, if you follow us on social media, you'll see a lot of stories about, my employer used me as an example yesterday, and things like that. And it's like, yeah, you're valued. And so no matter whether it's me or anybody else, I think that's relevant. So that's the tie in my mind. The personal angle is that I moved back to Nashville. I was pregnant and I wanted to have my family here. And international work is a little less in Nashville than it is in Washington, D.C. or abroad. So, but I was really grateful to be able to put my passion and expertise into something that's, I feel, very connected to what I've been doing. And the participant stories are really remarkable. I think that's the key aspect. That's the focus. A lot of people, there's a huge bias of this population in our country, in Nashville and Tennessee. I think that our executive director talks about how they're always put on the margins, whether they're in the prisons that are on the margins of our counties and states and whatever, or even when they come back, they're expected to just not be around. We don't want to see you. We don't want to interact with you. When I asked friends about what they think before I started the job, some said, I'm not sure I would patronize a place if I knew that they employed formerly incarcerated people. I think that's a common sentiment, and a lot of that comes from a lack of proximity. Our founders always emphasize that word, which is actually spending time with people that have been formerly incarcerated, which is the case in most biases. So I do think those participant stories and their successes are remarkable and not what people expect from this population. So I do encourage everyone to sort of either get engaged with our material or wherever locally that is sort of spreading the news about this, because it will surprise you. I hope not, it doesn't surprise you, but the amount of change that the population is capable of when given the proper support, whether it's, I think your example of distance is really key. We're always on a bus line when we look for locations. A lot of times we're right now next to the rescue mission and the Greyhound bus line because that it would be silly for us to be far away from that. We know our population, we know how hard it is. We give a bus pass the moment basically they walk through the door so that they can come back. We have 3 vans. We drive them to their jobs. We pick them up and take them back home. We drive them to interviews. I mean, it's really basic stuff like this that just a lot of programs or I think policies or just bigger picture forgets about. If you can get someone in a van, they can finish their job readiness class with us and be downtown for or down in Murfreesboro Road for their parole meeting, and make, check all the boxes so that they're doing well. A lot of it is just almost like me. It was almost impossible to get here on time, and yet that's going to be a violation on my record, right? So those are just some of the things about what the realities are.
So, Sheriff, please tell us about this grand facility that you're building. I mean, we're all here with bated breath, want to hear the details of this project. So, please share.
It's kind of funny. I forgot to even tell you about that, didn't I? I've given you all the bad things about. So at the time we were in a place of needing not more beds in Nashville. We had 1,800 empty beds. I'm very happy about, and so we tore down our old facility that was where booking was, and the central booking system. And so when we were doing that, instead of telling the whole truth to our city, I said, well, if I could get the money to build what they think we need, which would be a jail.
Right.
And it's easier to argue, unfortunately, in the politics of today that you need that. If they'll give me the money, I'll build what we need. Now, I don't build anything, but I could get the people who know what they're doing to build what we need. So sure enough, we got $120 million. By the way, they built it in the wrong place, but anyway. So we had the money, and now we're going to design what we need. And so we did the data analysis about what population we would like to serve and what we'd like to do. So basically what you have is 2 facilities side by side being built as we speak. They're opening in September and October of this year. And if you just think of a booking room, which looks just like this, by the way, an open booking design where people would be coming and, of course, triage and so forth. But right outside of this thing called a booking room being built at the same time is what we call our behavioral care center. So what will happen in the future when that person arrives that is a misdemeanor offender or charged at that point with a misdemeanor crime and is also diagnosed mentally ill, and this has been the hardest 2 years, just trying to figure out the legal way to get this accomplished. But the way it's right now planned is that we would look at the case. If it is misdemeanor charges, the district attorney's office and the public defender here in town have agreed to have a review prior to court, which means that if the individual agrees to go into a mental health environment in lieu of jail, then the charges would never be lodged against them. Therefore, they would have no criminal justice record. You mentioned something I'm very interested in, because a lot of times in most systems like here, when you're fingerprinted, it triggers everything. And getting that out of the system to help the individual is very complicated. So what we're trying to do is pre-booking, the start of the process, allow a person to choose what we would call the behavioral care side. They would be in the hands of here in town, it's called the mental health co-op, and that group would be in charge of the mental health care. What does that mean? Up to 30 days, direct mental health care. No terms like inmates, no court dates, no handcuffs and restraints and lockdown and the world that they live in. This is a complete treatment center. And what would then happen is After the completion of a treatment plan, upon completion of that, they would have no court dates, they would have no court fines, they would have no probation officers, they would have nothing tied to the criminal justice system. And hopefully what would occur is the follow-up care would be then done in the community, not in a criminal justice way, for their mental health follow-up. We are studying this right now, but one of the things I have everybody ask me, where are you going to get the money? We don't need money. Do you know why? It's being wasted in criminal justice anyway. I mean, I have that same person housed in the wrong place tonight. He or she has been, overseen by the wrong thing, correctional officers, counselors, caseworkers, court officers, transportation officers, all that stuff that we bottleneck the system with and charge you a lot of money. You take the individual out, I don't need that money in corrections. I want the money to go directly into the care of mental health. And potentially the follow-up care for that individual will continue into what is leaving this mental health center. Couple things to know. The average length of stay for a mentally ill person in our jail is misdemeanor is 57 days. The reason is because they're probation violators. Why are they probation violators? Because we never should have put them on probation anyway. These are misdemeanors. And so oftentimes that individual is awaiting a bed somewhere or awaiting things that, by the way, aren't available. So they stay in a jail system somewhat lost, charging the county corrections cost and all the law enforcement side of it. So what we plan to do is move that individual in treatment, let that money pay for direct mental health care, and then upon leaving here, they owe the criminal justice system nothing.
And then, so once the person is released, first of all, how long is the person going to end up staying in that facility? And once they're released, are they going to be connected to other services so that they can continue to get medication and the services they need, or what's the follow-up step to that?
Yeah, and so it's a really good question. The way our system is set up here, we have this not-for-profit or this nonprofit mental health co-op who handles mental health all throughout the community, but they're also responsible for mental health care in the jail as you would know it today. There is a new contract with them right now being negotiated, and what it says from us is two things. One is no individual can leave. By the way, it's up to 30 days, what you would call 30 days inpatient in-house, and that the co-op in this situation is required to assign the follow-up care into the community. Now, what's important about that is, and again, I don't know if every place does it. I bet the answer is yes. We release 100 people a day. There are 100 people arrested a day. They come to jail. 30 of those are mentally ill, and 30 of them are released today. Those 30 people are basically the door opens and we push. Because the legal system is done with you, right? We don't have a connection, and people call it pre-release planning. Prisons and jails are different. Y'all know that. But the truth is, jails are very difficult to do pre-release planning for because these individuals aren't with you long enough to get a lot of things accomplished. And so the door's opening so fast, people are coming and going in and out of the jail system. This contract with what we would think would be mental health co-op would require them to not release anyone to the streets. So you can't just open the door and push the mentally ill person who's been with you for 26 or 12 days or whatever that is onto the streets of Nashville without follow-up care there to pick them up. Now, they could be released from another center, but not right back out into the streets of Nashville, as we're doing 30 of those a day now.
And are there any plans, last question on this, are there any plans for people who are charged with felony offenses?
So not in this particular center. Obviously, over in what you and I would call the traditional jail detention side, there is a contract for services of mental health, and obviously you guys know this, but the level of acuity in that environment is extreme. I mean, we have all sorts of issues there. One of the things that led me to this place that we're sitting here today talking about is that I realized that the number one, the 2 and 3 reasons that mentally ill people are coming to jail is because the system has them in it, and they're not. I mean, go back for a second. The man on the sign, the naked man in the airport, and the young man whose family, all of those people in the future would arrive and never go to jail. They would be, in lieu of that, would be handed off to mental health, stabilized, and let's just say go through the program. Let's say they, in 20 days, they get off their medication and come back. This time they come right back to mental health instead of building a criminal history that they'll never get out of. And we're trying to avoid what we call stacking the deck.
So turning to you, Sam, What are the next steps now for both the app as well as the data collection through Measures for Justice? I understand that it's like in limited counties right now. What's the time frame to, number one, see if this is working, see what we need to change, and number two, when can it expand to all of Florida? Because hi, I'm in Miami. We really need you to come down south.
Well, the Measures for Justice initiative, it's kind of deceptive because the pilot project is in Pinellas and Pasco County. And if you're not familiar with Florida, that's Pinellas is St. Petersburg, like where everybody goes to the beach on the West Coast, and Pasco County is just north of that. But the statutory mandate is for every county in Florida. Right now, there's a bill working its way through the legislature that alters some of the requirements and definitions on the data that's supposed to be collected and pushes the collection date back, or the start of collections back, a couple of months. But that is, right now it's in the next 5 or 6 months or so. Looks like the timeline. Don't quote me on that because it's not up to my control. But yeah, it's supposed to be going live for every county in Florida, which is exciting and scary at the same time. So I'm working with just the 2 counties, but every county has their own effort underway. As far as the Diversion App goes, that's currently in the what we call the discovery phase with these counties, and that basically means that we have the concept sort of ironed out and outlined out, and we're sitting down with the state attorney, the public defender, and members of the judicial staff, as well as the clerk for each county, and saying, tell me what the problems are with this idea. Tell me what the good things are about this idea. Where do you see, bottlenecks? Where do you see potential? Things like that. And then we take that back and we develop sort of our grand scheme or grand proposal for the application. So that's kind of where we are with that. I'm hopeful that will get kicked off in the next 6 months or so, and begin active development. Once active development starts, it's usually a 9 to 12 month timeline from start of development to a finished product being launched as what we would term like public version 1, after having gone through several internal versions for testing.
Awesome. And Maryam, turning back to you. So what's next for Project Return? What are some of the other services you want to, that are on the horizon, or where are you looking to expand? Are you looking to expand out of Nashville? Just, kind of walk us through the next 5 years, let's say.
Well, we have grown quite a bit in terms of demand just recently. In 2018, full disclaimer, I joined the organization just this year, but in 2018, upon, crunching the numbers, we grew by 43% in demand. So, and we're on track this year to go 20% more. So that's just the not only the number of people that are walking through the front door, but the number of people that are completing our job readiness class and our mock interviews and sort of ready to get employed. So, growth is the word in terms of responding to this demand, and we're happy to have it. It means that the word on the street is good about our organization, and it means that we are doing what we need to do. We're getting people going with their lives, and they're rebuilding. So the future, I'd say, is just probably more growth and responding to that growth. We're trying to keep our revenue, we created these social enterprise to be able to help with that. So keep our revenue coming in to supplement whatever grants and contracts don't cover. With that kind of growth, it's sort of, you're catching up, which is kind of scary at times. We launched a third social enterprise this year, and when I went to talk to the manager, I said, "What innovative pilot things do you have?" And he said some crazy ideas about technology and sort of property maintenance and landscaping. So I think there are some fun things down the line, and the sky might be the limit with that, which is great. We would love, probably we're going to need more space at some point. It would be great to get some state-of-the-art facilities for some of these construction and entertainment, hospitality classes. So I think you can look around the country at some of the, the sort of cutting-edge reentry shops similar to ours. We're in that cohort in terms of the types of awards and things that we do. And it's largely often about facilities and just scale. And sure, I think we would be open to serving more cities in Tennessee. Definitely not thinking beyond that at this point. Tennessee's a great place to, there's a lot of work to do here. We're sort of a growth industry in terms of prisons, whereas many states are sort of trying to decrease that. We don't seem to be doing that quite yet.
Well, the sheriff's working on it.
I know. He's incredibly inspirational, Sheriff. I honestly have to double take sometimes when I listen to you talk. I think it's great. So there's a lot of attention to this, obviously now, all the way up to the president of the country, down to the local legislator. So I'm excited about I know we might be talking about this, but I'm excited about also what might happen in criminal justice in general. But we are growing to meet. We're growing in response to the growth and continuing to innovate. So that really right now, like I'll give you an example. Right, our numbers seem small in some ways, but we had 556 people last year complete the 3-day course, do all the mock interviews. I mean, it's kind of a high bar, right? So you have to do all that before you can get into the employment. And we had an 81% job acquisition rate. So 451 people got into long-term employment. So the more we can do that for more people, I think the better everybody is. Our communities are safer. Recidivism, we haven't really talked about that, is really linked to employment as well. Recidivism is just the chance of reincarceration, which is, by the way, I don't know if you know, but it's incredibly high. It can be up to sort of 30 to 40%, I believe, in the first year. And if you go about 3 to 6 years out, it can be anywhere closer to 70% that you're going back, which is shocking. And so that tells you a lot about the cycle that's going on. And so employment's a major thing to bring that down. So our recidivism has historically been 15%. Last year was about 17, so we keep it below 20. So just to give you an idea of sort of why this reentry is important, I feel like there's still a misunderstanding about reentry in general as we talk about criminal justice reform. It's sort of missed. A lot of people just see it as probation, parole, but it's a bigger thing that I think everyone's sort of spoken to on the panel.
So we've got about 7 minutes left. So I'd like to open it up to some questions. If not, I can keep, chatting over here, but I just want to check in with y'all and see if you have any questions or, yes, Anthony.
I have a question to the sheriff. First of all, great program. It's wonderful. So 2 questions. One, are other people doing what you're doing?
Yeah.
Is this something that you heard unique to you? Number 2, I didn't quite understand. When is this evaluation done? Is it done, on scene?
Right.
Do you do it for every person that comes through the jail, whether it's felony or misdemeanor?
Yeah, great question. Couple things. Memphis is a long way from here, but it's in Tennessee. It's known for the CIT model, which basically means there's an event occurring and a potential arrest occurring out in the community somewhere. There's a crisis team assigned to go to the scene, and the way the model works is the evaluation occurs on the scene, and then if deemed to be mentally ill, the goal is to not arrest in lieu of going to another place. There's a lot of really good things about it. I've heard about it from years. I've seen it. I'll tell you, there's some criticisms too. Some of it is that the police are tied up too long. There's frustrations. You have to train all the police officers, and every person there has to understand it. I've been here for 30 years, and 20 of those years, Nashville talked about doing it. I got tired of hearing about it. It was never going to happen because we didn't have the leadership. I'm not criticizing these people to make it happen. That wasn't going to happen. I got tired of waiting on what was the evaluation to occur in the field and avoid arrest. So what I said was, okay, look, let's let the police be Uber. You bring me the person, let a mental health person decide at the facility whether they're mentally ill or not, and if they are, we'll never book them anyway. It's the same concept that they use in other places, but they use it in the field. I gave up on everyone learning to do it and said, bring them here, and upon entry, in this design, it's the first thing you will do. You'll be assessed. Obviously, let's be honest, 80+% of these people are severely intoxicated oftentimes. That can happen immediately, but the goal is that's the first thing that would happen. If you qualify under two categories, your level of acuity of mental illness, clearly if someone is, homicidal, suicidal at the moment, we cannot move them into a treatment center. But the reality of that is upon stabilization, and we believe a vast percentage of these people go automatically, you're a misdemeanor and you're mentally ill, then you would go directly into the center. The kicker here, and every state's different, but I'm in the wrong room to criticize lawyers, but I've been very frustrated with the issues of what I really wanted to do was to avoid booking the people. Because once you do it, and it's been mentioned, I mean, you have further complicated everybody's life. If the system, let's say the DA, who is not here, but there are staff here, I went and met with him and the chief of police first and said, look, I want to build this facility that will allow us to divert these people, not once a judge tells you to do it. It's way too late. Can't we do it pre-booking, right? Can't we do it before we start the criminal justice process? And so there's some legal maneuvering we're having to do to make that work. And again, some of that means it has to be maybe the booking starts but never finishes, which is kind of some conversation about how do you get it back out. The goal for me is to never call them an inmate, never treat it as a custody case. They're in treatment, not jail. The individual has to agree to go, right, in my state. So the DA has agreed to say he, in this case, his office, is willing to say if you will go for mental health treatment in lieu of jail, we won't prosecute you for the crime. And so there's a lot going into how that actually will work, but we see it happening immediately. There are cases in our hands every day that go in very high level of problems. Upon stabilization, we would allow the mental health staff to tell us, are they eligible to move now? We would then move them over a week later, 2 weeks later, but we hope to catch most of those on the front door.
Other questions? Yes.
Gosh, I hope so. I read a great story about LA, by the way, recently, and they were trying to ask for jail money, and instead I think turned it into what I love the way that was written. The answer is no. I don't know of anyone who is doing it this way. There are diversion centers. Y'all know a lot about them. What I don't like is I don't like you being ordered to do that once you're in the courtroom. I have learned over the years, judges aren't bad people, lawyers aren't bad people, but they really don't know a lot about dealing with mental health. So why don't we just do that prior to all of us who do criminal justice getting involved? And so I want that diversion to occur for a whole lot of reasons. Then our data should support how many people are incarcerated in our country, right? If you reduce that down, and how many people are in mental health treatment, that should go up. And one of these days, cities like Nashville won't have to lie to its voters and steal jail money to build mental health centers. Yeah, here's something that I mean, my peers don't love me sometimes, and here's why. When you tell people you don't need more money, you say the chief of police, and he's a friend of mine in this town, he has a $200 million budget. We have a $100 million budget. If I say to him, which I do, take a third of it away. Take a third of my money away. Take a third of the defense attorneys and take a third. The reality of what we're doing is we're spending criminal justice money to deal with what is a health crisis. If you move that money, you don't need more. You just need it in the proper hands and get rid of the politics, which I hate to say it. It's easier to ask for public safety money than health care. And we've got to get that conversation changed.
Yes, and all the way in the back. Yeah.
Sheriff, I wish we had someone like you in every county in this country. Applaud what you're doing, but when you address the population that you're trying to serve, you keep saying people with mental illness. What do you do about the people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, like autism spectrum disorders, what we used to call mental retardation, FASD, and such?
You know, and let me be real clear. From the very beginning, I've learned a ton in the last 5 years. I mean, about the issues and the complexity of just the word mental illness. I think that's what you're right. I mean, the issue of who are we talking about? I mean, there's a big controversy, as you know, about addictions, right? I mean, addiction is, by all accounts, in my opinion, a mental illness issue. But what I've tried to do, because I want the public to understand, that's where we need to look. What you're doing is you're arresting people for basically issues that have nothing to do with them understanding the law and violating the law. They didn't know to wear clothes to the airport. And so if I could get the conversation about that, and I hate to say this, then we can grow into your issues. I mean, I've had so many people ask questions about who's eligible and who wouldn't be. You know what I say? It shouldn't be my decision. It shouldn't be the judge's decision or lawyer's decision. It should be mental health. Can we do something better with this person than to call them a criminal upon arrival to the criminal justice system? And my hope is one of these days, even felony cases, understand, y'all know this, a large percentage of these are domestic. You know why they're domestic? It's the son of the family I described earlier. That's what that was, a domestic arrest, because they were in fear of him being in their house. And so we have to realize that the family wants help. Instead of having to send them through the criminal justice system, in their case, it was a bipolar son. But it could be any of the things you're talking about. But I'm trying, I hate to say the word politically, I'm trying to get the public to understand how they're really dealing with a man on a sign. You're not doing anything by arresting him, right? We should be doing something about what's really causing him to be on the sign, and not have a judge tell him you're convicted of 20 days. And so I hate to say it, my next generation of conversations are how much of this can we deal with facilities and operations like this? And I'm on the tail end of my career, I hope. And my hope is that the conversation shifts when you talk about taking money away. Don't let anybody fool you. You don't need more money. I mean, I could give you right now, just in the agencies I'm familiar with, if you would move that population and treat it as a health care issue, the money is, if not billions, already being given to entities like mine. We don't need it. And by the way, the liability, my lawyer left earlier, she would tell you, I get sued all the time over housing people in an environment called jail. It is dangerous for us, for them, and just a bad overall practice. So the money is not the problem. We need to reallocate it in the right place and give it to the experts who know much more about mental health than jails do.
So, okay, so unfortunately, we are out of time. I'm going to ask my panelists, can you stay for a few minutes? And I know, think you're staying for a lot more than a few minutes, but, right? No? Okay. You know, okay.